The International Criminal Court's top prosecutor is seeking arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister as well as 3 Hamas leaders. Karim Khan says the men all bear responsibility for war crimes and crimes against humanity related to the war in Gaza and the October 7th terror attacks in Israel.
Yahya Sinwar is Hamas's leader in Gaza. He's one of the men targeted by the ICC arrest warrant request. So is this man, Ismail Haniyeh, the Qatar-based political leader of Hamas. The third is Hamas's military strategist, Mohammed Daif. The ICC's top prosecutor says he has reasonable grounds to believe the 3 are responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity committed on and after October the 7th.
Murder as a crime against humanity and as a war crime. The taking of hostages as a war crime. Rape and other acts of sexual violence during captivity as crimes against humanity and as war crimes. Torture during captivity as a crime against humanity and as a war crime.
Khan is also requesting an international arrest warrant for Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. 7 months into the war, he thinks the 2 bear direct responsibility for war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in Gaza, including using starvation as a weapon of war and intentionally directing attacks against a civilian population.
Israel, like all states, has the right to defend its population. It has every right to ensure the return of hostages that have been criminally and callously taken. Those rights, however, do not absolve Israel of its obligations to comply with international humanitarian law.
Netanyahu rejects the accusations.
As Prime Minister of Israel, I reject with all my soul the comparison made by the prosecutor in The Hague between democratic Israel and the mass murderers of Hamas. This is a complete distortion of reality.
Israel is not a member of the ICC and doesn't recognize its jurisdiction. But if warrants are issued, which may take months, those named could face arrest if they travel to one of the court's 124 member states, which include most of Europe, but not the United States.
We are joined now by Chile Eboe-Osuji, who served as president of the International Criminal Court from 2018 to 2021. Welcome to DW, Mr. Osuji. I want to start by asking you that does the fact that these warrants are being sought already mean that there is sufficient evidence?
That must be what the prosecutor sees. The prosecutor must present to the 3 judges of the pre-trial division evidence that shows that there is reasonable grounds to believe that the people being sought in the arrest warrant committed international crimes or are responsible for international crimes. So he would not be moving forward if he didn't have evidence he believed to be strong enough to sustain such a move. It's up to the judges to decide whether or not they agree with him, of course.
But then, so in your experience, do you think these warrants are likely to be granted then?
I cannot second guess that. I mean, it would mean prejudging a question. What I can tell you, however, is that in my experience, both as a prosecutor before being a judge, a prosecutor at the Rwanda Genocide Tribunal, Special Court for Sierra Leone, and so on, and as an academic teaching this, many people have been tried and convicted for less than what we've seen in the media so far.
Well, we know that Israel and the US have called this move outrageous. We heard in that report that it equates the country defending itself with the terrorist organization. But as you just pointed out, that others have had warrants for less than what you've seen so far. But what's your reaction to that assertion, that it's not a fair comparison?
That's not how you look at it. This is a political statement. The legal statement is, do we have a law And what does that law say? When you look at what that law says and then you compare it with the evidence that you come to a legal conclusion. You don't calling somebody terrorist or not. It's neither here nor there. In that legal calculation, even democratic states, some leaders of democratic states have been known to do things that they should not do. Hamas, yes, carried out a horrid attack on the 7th of October, in which 1,200 people died, killed. So far, the IDF operation has resulted in the deaths of more than 34,000 people. That mathematics there already tells you that there is something wrong that needs to be looked into.
Well, we also know that crimes against humanity is a very serious accusation, especially against a serving leader. And we also know that the ICC has already faced criticism for not issuing similar warrants against leaders like Syrian President Bashar al-Assad or Iran Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Do you think that undermines the ICC's credibility?
Not at all. Again, there are things to be looking at here. In the situation relating to Israel has to do with Palestine being a neighboring state and Palestine being a state party to the Rome Statute. And the Rome Statute gives the ICC jurisdiction over crimes committed on the territory of a state party. You don't have the same with Syria. You don't have the same with Iran. Of course, if you have the same with Syria or Iran, you'll be seeing the same configuration. The closest comparison you may look at may be Myanmar, for instance. Myanmar, not a state party to the Rome Statute, but Bangladesh is a state party to the Rome Statute. But when Rohingyas were driven out of Myanmar into Bangladesh, because Bangladesh is a state party to the Rome Statute, that was a basis for the court to exercise jurisdiction over the matter. So that's the closest comparison, not Syria, not Iran. If you have neighboring states who decide to join the Rome Statute, neighbors of Syria or Iran, and then the effects of that war seen on the territory of those states, then you can be saying, well, what about that?
That's a really interesting clarification that you just made there. But I want to circle back to what you said about the political statements before we go. We've seen that different leaders react based on who is being charged. We saw that the reaction to the ICC warrant against Russian President Putin, for example, was widely applauded. We're seeing criticism here. Do you feel like that hobbles the reach and that hobbles the actions of the ICC?
Well, that cannot be a blame on the ICC at all. The blame for that will be on those who will make that kind of calculation, decide on the political basis what indictment they support and what not. You cannot blame the International Criminal Court for that, for what politics states choose to play.
Oh, yes. I just mean to say not so much to blame the ICC, but to ask, does that limit its ability to function as it's meant to?
Of course it does, definitely so. When you have states who play politics with the rule of law, yes, it does constrain the ability of the rule of law. Now, when I write and talk about this thing, there's somebody whose views we must always take into account. In 1945, April 1945, 2 days or so before he was appointed as the chief prosecutor of the United States for Nuremberg, Mr. Justice Robert H. Jackson gave a speech to the American Society of International Law in which he said, look, we cannot have a rule of law that operates on the basis of our own national interest, for basis of what we wanted to do. For us, international rule of law, for it to have meaning and effect in protecting the world and humanity, and even the Americans, he said, needs to apply it even-handedly, impartially, regardless of who you're looking at as your allies or as your enemies.
Some fascinating insights there. Thank you so much for laying that out so clearly for us. Chile, Eboe-Osuji, a former president of the International Criminal Court.
Thank you.
Well, I'm joined now by Geoffrey. He was a prosecutor at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. He was lead prosecutor at the trial of Slobodan Milosevic. He joins me tonight from Canterbury, England. Mr. Nice, it's good to see you again. Is the ICC prosecutor's request, is it a done deal? I mean, will the arrest warrants, in your opinion, will they be issued?
Well, of course, I can't answer that question because I'm not the judge and I haven't seen all the evidence. But Mr. Khan has indicated that he's set himself a higher than normal standard, whether the judges will apply that or not, in order to be satisfied that the evidence could lead to a conviction. He's also, I know, taken independent advice from a body of experts acting pro bono and sort of behind the scenes to check on whether he may have made any mistake. So it's pretty likely that the evidence he's presented will be strong. Whether it's strong in respect of all five or some of them, we can't decide. But I think it's quite likely that just simply from what he tells us about the way he's done his work, that we may get some of these arrest warrants issued, yes.
You say that these are the higher standards for this case. What do you understand under higher standards?
Well, as he explained in the interview he gave with Christian Amanpour, he didn't rest on the reasonable grounds to believe level. He relied on a reasonable prospect of conviction level, which is a bit higher. Now, all these standards are easy to state and hard to test. But what he's saying is, OK, here's the standard of the court, and I've made my standard a bit higher than that. So, and that's a sort of responsible approach to take in an issue as sensitive as this.
We heard from U.S. President Joe Biden this evening. He said that this announcement was outrageous, and he said that we are dealing here with false equivalencies, that you should not even try to compare Hamas with the government or the actions of Israel. I mean, does he have a point there? Did the prosecutor, did he have to make this announcement today? Did he have to announce that he was seeking an arrest warrant for Israeli leaders in the same breath that he said he's seeking arrest warrants for Hamas leaders? Why do it together?
Well, he certainly didn't have to. He could have done it on different days. On the other hand, if he'd only decided to do it on different days for political appearance reasons, that would have been pretty unsatisfactory as well. I don't know what happened inside the office that led them to look at the situation and to decide that these 5 requests for warrants could be made. But I don't see that there's any question of his trying to assert moral equivalence. He simply said, here's the law, here's the people on each side who, for the time being, I'm going to ask warrants should be issued. So Biden's response is, political response, as is the following bit of the statement, I think, from Blinken, where they say that no efforts have been made to allow, or no sufficient efforts have been made to allow Israel to deal with these matters themselves. Overall, I think that it's unwise of both America and Great Britain, if it does it, and Germany, if it does it, to start speaking against what the prosecutor has done. We all have to remember that the reason things like this happen is because we have incompetent politicians who make terrible mistakes, whether they're the politicians in Israel, Gaza, Hamas, whatever you like, or the politicians who've been sitting around them for the last century and 20 years, seeing the creation of the state of Israel and doing whatever they've done not to succeed in heading off this huge, foreseeable tragedy. So we got lousy politicians, or bad politicians, you may think. And it doesn't really sit very comfortably in their mouths when they didn't stop this happening by creation, for example, of a one-state solution for Israel and Palestine, or for a two-state solution, when they let it drift for so many years, it doesn't sit very easily in their mouths now to complain when an independent body composed of professional people who've got no interest in selling their integrity for some political objective, whose only interest will be in getting the job done well, doesn't sit easily in the mouths of supporting parties such as the United States, to be offhand in condemnation of what's done.
Mr. Let me pick up on that. You say that the prosecuting attorney, that they're using higher standards than they normally would, and that they are handling this case with the utmost care. Then certainly the decision to announce that they're seeking arrest warrants for these leaders, Hamas and Israeli leaders, announcing that together, there had to be a reason, there had to be a decision to do that and to have it seen together for public consumption. Do you agree?
No, I don't even understand your question, because it's you who've got to justify the question. Why should they announce decisions on a different day?
I'm saying that nothing is up to chance. Nothing is up to chance. I think that the prosecutor knew exactly what he was doing, and I'm trying to ask you, why do you think he did what he did today by grouping them together?
I don't know. But if you put yourself in his position, and he looks at the evidence in the round, all of it, favorable, unfavorable, Hamas, Israel, and he sets his team to work, and his team come back and say, well, here's the evidence that looks like it's these two and these three against whom there's enough evidence, and then they had a review, and then they have a discussion with their independent panel of experts, and they come to the conclusion that this three and this two should be indicted. It would be a bit of political window dressing of the worst kind to choose to go for one first and the other second. And which one should go first? I'm afraid I don't follow your question, but by all means go and ask Mr. Khan if he wants to answer you. I don't know whether he will, but ask him, well, why did you not do it on different days, and see what he says.
Well, I can't ask him tonight, but I'm glad that I had you to ask another brilliant legal mind, Mr. Geoffrey Nice. Always good talking with you. We appreciate your time and your analysis tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I want to go now to our correspondent, Ibrahim. She's in Jerusalem covering this story for us. So talk to me about the reaction that we're getting out of Israel. We just heard the Prime Minister there.
That's right. He has now commented, and this came after a series of reactions from senior Israeli political figures, in addition to the Prime Minister calling this move by the ICC prosecutor disgraceful. He has also accused the prosecution of anti-Semitism, which is an accusation that has come out of political leadership time and again throughout this war against multiple international bodies whenever Israel finds itself in a position where it's accused of things like war crimes, or even when it's subject to heavy criticism. In addition to the Prime Minister, we've also heard from the President, who is seen as sort of the spokesperson for the spirit of the nation, if you will. We've heard from the Israeli Foreign Minister, Israel Katz, all condemning this move, or this move by the ICC prosecutor seeking the arrest of Netanyahu and Gallant. We've also heard from Israeli opposition on this, who have been very critical of the Prime Minister and his government and the conduct of the war. But in this issue, they sort of voice the same concerns as the Prime Minister. We've heard from Yair Lapid, the leader of the opposition, who completely rejected this idea, this notion that Israeli leadership and Hamas leadership can even be mentioned in the same breath, because, of course, the prosecutor, while he didn't make a direct comparison between them, he is seeking arrest warrants for both Hamas and Israeli leadership in the same statement.
And Israel does not recognize the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. So what impact is this going to have, if any?
Right now, the prosecution is seeking an arrest warrant. So there's no arrest warrant yet. So effectively, this doesn't really hinder or limit the movement of the Prime Minister or his defense minister. But if we were to arrive at a situation where there is indeed an arrest warrant, this would limit the movement of these two senior Israeli politicians. If they were to find themselves in a country that does recognize the jurisdiction of the ICC, that country would be obligated to facilitate their arrest and their transfer to The Hague. But this is, one of the latest of a series of diplomatic blows to Israel on the global stage, in reaction to how it has chosen to conduct this war.
DW's Aya Ibrahim with the latest tonight from Jerusalem. Aya, thank you.